What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel today for another review. Today, Zero and I are finally getting our chance to review and discuss the new film, The Strangers, which we are going to be talking about Chapter 1, which makes its release May 17th. This is a trilogy, so Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 are on the way. Obviously, we'll be here to cover that, but today we're going to be focusing on Chapter 1, making its way to theaters May 17th. I think beyond us is both loving horror. I think why, and you can tell me if I'm speaking for you incorrectly or not, but I think another reason why we are just been really excited for this one is because there's been so much pre-coverage to this. Like, we got to see some of this back in New York Comic-Con. I recently got to see some of this at WonderCon, then back at CinemaCon. So just the build to this. And I believe you had a chance to speak to the director, Rennie Harlin, who, if you're not familiar, just has a impressive resume, very diverse resume, nonetheless, in all different genres. But, you know, from hearing him really speak about this film at the panels, getting to see some of those clips, which I'm going to tell you one of my biggest highlights, and I can confirm now have seen it, that it definitely wasn't just a moment of being in a big theater room or a big convention room, that in fact it is what it is. I just was on board for all of the reasons that they really sold me into this. And I also think too, as somebody who loves a film, and then if the film is good, you want a sequel, and the fact they're like, hey, we're giving you all a trilogy and you're not gonna have to wait long for them, I'm like, all right, well, cool. Sign me up here. But now that I've seen it, I'm definitely going to give you my thoughts and remarks. But I will say, like, all the way from all of the coverage, all the different little sneak peeks that we got, moments to kind of talk to the director or intervene with the folks behind this film, all the build to this point, I've been very excited for it. But for you, yeah, I want to make sure I'm not incorrectly speaking for you, but this whole journey to get to this point of watching, what has that been?
It's been a long time. It has been a very long time coming. I was in the audience for the Strangers trilogy panel at New York Comic-Con, where I did get a little bit of a peek at the first maybe 10 minutes at the time, what was, you know, supposed to be the first 10 minutes of that cut. Man, those speakers in there, were, first of all, loud as hell, which I don't know if, you know, that was supposed to be the deal where we're just going to blast the volume up all the way. But something in my head told me that they're doing this on purpose with a ridiculous volume in here. Because, again, keep in mind, this is a panel room at New York Comic-Con, you know, not your average Alamo screening room or whatever. But I had a very strong feeling that that was on purpose, because with this new trilogy, they're going to highlight the sound design, you know, that kind of creeping suspense that kind of was solidified with the original Strangers movie. Eerie silence matched with, you know, huge moments of, you know, knocking and creaking of floors, and the kind of stuff that is real enough to get you when you're home alone. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's no one is exempt from that. No one is exempt from that. You know, if you're chilling home alone and then you hear the door creak open a little bit, and like, sure, my house is wood, so it might just be fluctuation, but also what if, you know, no one is exempt from that. And I have a very strong feeling that they did do that on purpose, especially to get the flesh and you'll get there when you get there, I promise. But I was very excited after getting all the information that I did at Comic-Con, especially with Rennie Harlin on the team, who's a horror legend. If you don't know, he directed Nightmare on Elm Street 4. I recently just saw one of his older films in preparation for this, called Prison. It was doing a screening at my local theater. I had to go check that one out. I think Die Hard 2. He's around. He's really around, and he is not a stranger to suspense. He's not a stranger to kind of over-the-top violence, which I think was a very interesting choice for The Strangers, because Rennie Harlin as a director is so extreme. He is a very extreme guy. And The Strangers is this IP that is so ridiculously based in reality. We don't really have the elbow room to get as crazy as I know he can get. But again, I know horror is his thing. He lives here most of the time. So I have been crossing my hands and my legs in anticipation and trying to be as patient as I possibly can. And they're also knocking it out of the park with marketing right now, which is just making me it's my patience is running very thin, Najir. My patience has been running very thin. Every time I open up social media, like The Strangers are somewhere. They were just at Coachella for some reason. You know, they're in New York, they're in California. They were probably at CinemaCon stalking you.
They was in cosplay, 1,000%. 1,000%.
I knew it.
I thought I was just going to normally walk out of the theater. And I was like, but by the way, you're going to have to go through these 3 strangers really quickly, which was definitely like, yeah, I'm so ready for that. That was it. That was the last straw for me. I was like, nah, I need this film right now. And here we are.
Yeah. And I'm also very pleased with I had some concerns when I learned that The Strangers is going to be a trilogy, because trilogies, you know, in the horror genre these days come with a little bit of a stigma. I call it the curse of the trilogy.
Really?
You know, if you think back to Halloween, we had that really great first entry. Halloween 2018, that was a blast. That was such a fun time. But you know, we had already signed on for a trilogy, and so we're like, we got to pump out 2 more movies. What are we gonna do? I don't know. The second and third ones definitely did not hit as hard as the first. Then, you know, later down the line, we have the same thing happening with The Exorcist, The Exorcist Believer. We shared sentiments on that one. It was a pretty strong, in our opinion, first film, but you know, we can only hope what is going on or what's going to happen with the other 2. So trilogies, it's a track run for horror, you know, big IPs like this. It's kind of a hit and miss. So I'm concerned.
Do you feel any type of way because this is considered a chapter 1 and they made it very clear that they're going to have all 3 pretty much released in the same year? I know 2 is for sure this year. I haven't heard word about 3 just yet. But they're saying they're all coming out in the year, which means that they've already established the stories. The continuity should be between the stories. And this isn't like hey, we're going to give you a 3-movie deal. We'll see how the first one goes, and then you could decide what you're going to do with the second one. Right. This one was more like, I have 3 right now. What's up? You know, sometimes, I don't know this. I don't know the approach with Halloween or The Exorcist, but I do know like this one was very much like, we have 3. They're like, cool, then you got 3. Instead of like, we're going to give you 3 movies, do the first, let's see how it is, and then we're going to decide what happens with the second one. And then the second one needs reshoots. And then what's the plan for the third one? That's when you start to get all that wonkiness when the studios get involved, and there's a lot of people that drop out of the project, and then they got to redo things. But like, I guess for this one, with that thought, it's like, I was less concerned and more excited because I'm like, because they already got the plan and the roadmap laid down. So let's go.
That was a huge sigh of relief for me as I'm sitting in the panel at New York Comic Con. I'm having these thoughts. I'm like, you know, sis, I don't know about a trilogy. I really don't know. Our track record is not so great. But once I learned that Rennie Harlan and the producer Courtney Solomon and the rest of the cast filmed the Strangers trilogy as one big movie, then go over to the editing portion and cut it up into 3 different parts, which should, you know, if everything goes right with the studios, should be released only within months of each other. I'm feeling so much better because there's no room for that type of, excuse me for, I left for lack of better words, but like a vibe change. You know what I mean? When a second movie doesn't feel anything like the first because it's been so far removed in between shooting times, and, you know, maybe you mess up and, you know, we have to switch directors. Like you said, people drop out, and you don't get that same feel. But this was all shot at one time. They will be releasing shortly, one after another. So it's really just one big movie in parts. And that feels great to me. And honestly, that feels like it could really be a cure for what I call the curse of the trilogy. Because it's not really a trilogy. It's a movie in parts, which I feel a lot better about.
Well, one quick question. I forget. So you didn't at New York Comic Con. First of all, we're such a we're such a duo because I love how like I hint at the sound mixing, and you're like, so I'm going to go talk about the sound mixing because that was my biggest thing. Yeah, obviously in the same panel room here, and I'm like, man, this sound is impressive. And we talked about it a little bit afterwards, and you ran off to something else after that. You was like, I think they piped that up to like really like get us into it. And I'm like, maybe they did, but if the sound mixing is going to be that good, I mean, listen, inject me with this right now. And I'm here to say, oh, it is. It is. The success of this film and the reason the things I liked about this film was truly the sound mixing was my first thing. I love the sense of paranoia. And I don't even know if I've ever said that about a film and made that like a sticking point. The paranoia in this film is on 1,000. Much like you said, if it's your house that makes a creep, if it's your blinds that's a little bit open, if it's just real quiet in your house or your space or your theater, whatever it may be, you're looking. I guarantee in theaters, you will be looking at that exit door a lot more than you anticipated because the paranoia is on 1,000. And the last thing I will say that I really enjoyed too, outside of everything, the preparation to get into this film, as you mentioned, the marketing and the constant appearances at major conventions and so on, I think is always a benefit. But there was, and I kind of tossed a little bit with this thought, is I did love at times where there was really believable behavior by our two survivors here. And that's Maya and Ryan, who Maya and Ryan, they've been together for about 5 years. And so with them being together, they go across the country for a little celebration. I mean, that's what Maya thinks. And Ryan just kind of like, well, we're just kind of kicking it, which was funny. Because he's like, oh, yeah, 5 year. Okay, cool. No worries. None of that. She got this couple that's going to spend some time together. And their car breaks down in Venus, Oregon. And they're forced to spend a night in this isolated Airbnb. First of all, you know me enough to know that as soon as I heard the Airbnb part of it, I was like, yeah, I'm out. Like, nah, bro. Nah, bro. The Airbnb part, the fact that they very much highlighted it as an Airbnb. They didn't say, oh, these my folks' house or we got a spare house. They said, this is an Airbnb. Everything about this was like, oh, no. But then, yeah, that whole night goes from them being terrorized by 3 murderous masked strangers. So, again, the third part that I liked about this film is really some of the believable, and I say some of the believable behavior by our leads, who is Froy and Madelaine, who plays Maya and Ryan. Because there's some things that they do that I'm like, that's exactly how I will respond. And I'm not saying I need to be right, but I hate when horror films do things and people just act in the most unbelievable manner. Like, certainly there was an ethnicity barrier here, because I'm going to say that they didn't do everything I would have did, but there definitely was some responses that I was kind of like, yes. And I kind of go with Ryan in the first part. Ryan was definitely responding in the way I was like, yeah, I would absolutely do that, or I would respond that way. Then the ethnicity barrier hits up, and I'm like, I would not go and act that way. And then there was just things in the film that were believable. Then there's things that just wasn't believable. And I don't want to give any specifics, but there was definitely a tether between like, this is working, that's not working. This is believable, that's not believable. So I was kind of like in that whole range of emotion. And I got to say, the 3 strangers, I think the story is really about them, because while they're here and while we do hear a sense of their motivation, which is very, very simple, and you probably could guess, but we won't give it away, we really didn't get much from them. So a lot of their behavior and even their motive, with even them noting their motive, still was kind of strange and kind of like, I don't know. I'll say this just so I can make sure you vibing with me here, because we don't check notes before we get started. One of the strangers was in the house at a point. And then next thing you know, he's knocking at the door outside the house. And he comes in. I'm just like, huh, you were just in there, but you had to make a grand entrance. That's a little dramatic for me, sir. Like, you could have just got to work. Like, you know what I mean? It was just stuff like that. I was just kind of like, why would you go back out? You're in to go back out to knock and then make a grand entrance. And then I kind of just landed on the fact that this is truly just one giant game of cat and mouse.
Yes.
Period. There's nothing else more than that. There's no more substance than that. It's a huge game of cat and mouse. And the last thing I'm gonna say, and I give it to you, is that this film does open up by drawing attention to national statistics and statistics about violent crimes. And they lay that out and whatnot, but then they give you a line that says, this story is one of the most brutal. I'm going to firmly disagree. I watch a lot of murder mystery and true crimes, and it's not even in the ballpark of what I would ever consider as one of the most brutal. But I get it that they're hyping it, they're trying to sell it, and maybe just because of the first film, maybe there's more to go. Maybe that's just the tagline for the 3. But for this film, this solo, if this was a standalone, which that's my first question to you. This as a standalone of the 3. Did you enjoy it as a standalone, or do you feel that you need to have the second and the third in order for this whole story to be told? Could you have watched this and walked away? And my answer to it is like, that tagline tells me there has to be more. And then the very, 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 very end of this film saved it. Otherwise, I'm like, all right, cool, I seen it. I'm good. Good sound mixing, some good scares, some paranoia in there. All those illusion shots, they're in there. But other than that, they didn't reinvent the wheel at all. There's a lot of tropes that you've seen in so many other films in this. I mean, I ain't gonna say they're borrowing, but they're definitely grabbing from certain buckets and like, yeah, throw that in there, throw that in there, throw that in there. Nothing out of the ordinary in this. You've seen, if you have a resume even close to yours, probably an eighth of what you watch, you should be able to cover everything in this film. I rest my case.
Lots of cliches in here, and you're right. It not only does it not reinvent the wheel, but it aggressively it follows the Bible. You know, it follows the Bible to a T. It doesn't, you know, again, like you said, it brings a little bit from here, it brings a little bit from there, but all of which we have seen before, and all of those we have seen in these types of home invasion horror subgenre films. So to answer your question, would I be able to do this? Would I be satisfied if this was just a standalone film? No, I would not. I would not. Mostly because I know that there's more coming. But if I hadn't done all the research and already had been a fan of this IP, still the answer would be no. The to be continued, that's what's keeping me going here. I will say if this were to just end the way that it ended, which I will not say, I do think I would be very disappointed because there is no real resolution. And I'm not saying that there has to be, because everyone should know at this point that this is a cliffhanger. You know, we'll see you next week, you know, when we're back after this commercial break. Yeah. Exactly. It doesn't do enough for me for that, but I just really hope that the message has been sent appropriately to the public, to let them know that, you know, hold on, you're only going to have to wait a couple months. You know, it's going to stay fresh in your brain, and then we will move on to the real meat. And something that Rennie Harlan did mention at the Comic-Con panel is that every movie will be crazier than the last.
Good.
So
yeah, right.
And this one, I think, was it did pretty well with the suspense. I believe around the 20-minute mark is when we start to get a little, you know, tense. We have the infamous line drop from the IP. Is Tamara home? You know, as soon as that line drops, we're about to get into it. I think everything before that, however, was a little bit unbelievable. I really like Madelaine Petsch as who I will assume to be final girl. We don't know. We'll see when we get there. But I really like her in her more tense moments. I think both of these actors and Froy Gutierrez, they're really good in their tenser moments. But when we have the exposition, which thankfully is only the first 20 minutes, you don't have to sit through anything crazy. You know what I mean? A little lifetimey for me. I don't know if I can contribute that to their acting abilities, which I don't think is true, because once the stakes turn up, then so does their performance. So I think I'm going to have to give that one to the writer's room, to the dialogue. It's a little cheesy for me. But again, it's only 20 minutes, and then is Tamara home? Kicks on, and you have already forgotten all about it.
Great points, man. Great point. So firmly agree. I was definitely going to touch on that, but you nailed it. I swear we're good partners. And listen, those door knocks, they're going to sound like gunshots. So listen, if you in the hood watching this,
tell me about it.
You in the hood, listen.
You ducking.
The surrealism
ducking.
and horror will come out at you. I will say this, and I we watched it together, so obviously we're exchanging thoughts with one another while watching it. I have to say, and I don't know where you may have discussed this in any of your previous content and whatnot, but gaslighting as an element of horror is starting to become one of my favorite things. It really is. Gaslighting in real life, hate it. It's very toxic.
Right.
But gaslighting in horror is this tool that happens to really bring out some very good moments. Because now, not only do you decide how you want to feel about that character, how you want to feel about the person who's being gaslit, and now you're emotionally invested into it, and then you're making the decision is that person truly gaslighting or not? And then the result happens. So you get a moment of self-reflection. However you want to diagnose that or dissect that, that's actually good storytelling, because you start to get invested in a way that hooks you to it. And I would say in this, there is an element of gaslighting, and I'm sure you're going to side with Maya, but at a point I started to side with Ryan, because he asked a legitimate question. He says, where's your sorority in this? And then she's like, no, I definitely seen something, but like, they did focus on her sorority in the film. The camera said, look what she did. So I'm like, oh, this is good. This is adding that bit of investment for folks who go to the theaters that want to hear people talking. You're going to have some commentary in some of these.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not mad at that at times, man. You know, The Blackening is one of my favorite films because the audience, you know what I mean? So I really was digging, and I really do look forward to seeing more gaslighting in horror films, man. I tell you. But last thing I will say for my thoughts is, when you go back to the sound mixing, it ain't just the sound, but it is the music, the singing. All of it makes you uneasy. It's loud, it's enhanced, but it sends a spine chill, and it makes your heart beat an extra little pap there. So like you're gonna be all for the sound. And I think that, like, yes, they highlighted that in some of the early stuff we saw, and it is indeed in fact true that they went pedal to the metal with that. So and the thing I was going to say to your comment about the ending almost saving the film, I think they realized it too, because why not have made that an after the credit stinger? But they said, oh, wait, just in case y'all forgot, we got more. So you need to see this, just in case you want to get up and be one of those folks that mix it. So like, I think they very intentionally knew what they were doing with that. I think I would have just added just at the end, unless it's at the very end of the credits, we didn't see it, but chapter 2 and a date. I would have went that route, just so folks know to sit up, strap up. Be coming back at you real soon. So we'll see. And it is calling for fall. So I'm thinking that they're trying to see what some of the other releases are for the year, because it's going to be very competitive this year with a lot of other things. We got M. Night Shyamalan coming through. There's just a lot of horror coming out this year, so maybe they want to take a look to say, oh, who's going out the Halloween weekend, the week before, the week after. You know, you want to try to get as much dollars as you can, and God knows this Halloween the October period is going to be competitive. So I think they're trying to see, and my suggestion is avoid October. Get there early or get there late, but just avoid October, and maybe you do one before October and one after. But avoid October. Just avoid October. It's not because the movie I think is bad or good. I just think it's a better strategy when you got 2 to put at the end of this year, and this is a May release. So avoid summer, because those big blockbusters are going to take away from you. But avoid October, too competitive. That's my final thoughts about this. What else do you got?
I would like fans to know. I did write an article about this for Dread Central and everything that I learned at the panel at New York Comic Con. Sorry to drop this so much, but there's some really good information that I learned that I am a little bit worried is not being blasted correctly. But fans of the Strangers IP, we should be hooting and hollering right now. Because one, we're getting 3 movies in the span of 1 year or 1 calendar year, which is really, really awesome. But also, the biggest unknown with this IP is why. What is the reason? And so we have our original, The Strangers. Then we also have a sequel that came many years after that, actually called The Strangers Prey at Night, which was a product of the same director, which also did, like the rest, follow the same formula. But we still don't really know the why. I mean, we have the infamous mic drop that comes at the end of all of the Strangers IPs, which was, why are you doing this to me? Because you were home. But that's not a real reason as to why these group of 3 hooligans are going around, like you said, playing this crazy game of cat and mouse. So Rennie Harlan did drop a little piece of exclusive information that I really hope, if this movie doesn't do it for you, I really hope that you would stay for chapter 2 and chapter 3, because he teased that we're going to find out what the reason is. We're going to learn the backstory about why these freaks are coming in and taking so much joy in, their adventures of home invasion. And aren't you curious? Because I am. And I have been since the original Strangers came out decades ago.
Yeah, I'm so excited for that, because like on the other end, the studio sort of less got this approach of like, we're actually going to get a glimpse as in terms of what happens to what happens to victims of this kind of violence. So like we're getting like both perspectives here. For the legacy OG fans, you're going to get why these creeps are doing what they're doing, but like from a societal standpoint, we're like, oh, but we're also getting this vantage point, so this perspective about the victims of it too. So those 2 narratives have to collide at some point, which tells you why we had to have 3 films for it. And it's not a reboot or remake. It just follows the tone. It's going to give us some answers to everything we've been wanting for over the years. So it's exciting. So
yeah,
I'll say,
I'm looking forward to it all.
I am. I will say that this is a good opening of the door, little knock at the door, shall I say, on this one, for things to come. I wasn't openly in love with this one, but I definitely was more on the positive side. So like B, like a solid B for me. But ultimately, I think it definitely has me ready. And we don't have to wait long. Just at some point this year, we're going to get the other 2 films. So I'm glad that's the case, because God knows if they had a release date of like 2026, oof.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oof. Nonetheless, The Strangers, folks, this is chapter 1 and coming to theaters May 17th. Get in the comments, let us know your thoughts, your excitement, your joy, your predictions, all that good stuff about this one. We'll be back very soon, sometime later on this year, for our review of the other 2 films. Thank you for watching this one.